regardless of how things go, like my intention is to show up in this way. And that you can have confidence in. That is in your control. The way that you are showing up is in your control. And that's what can create that confidence.
Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. A quick thank you to everyone that follows me on Instagram. If you haven't yet, follow me at Get Your Marriage On. I recently polled my followers and asked about whether or not they incorporate oral sex into their lovemaking. And to my pleasant surprise, 80% of them said yes, to one degree or another, oral sex is part of their lovemaking. And 77% they'd love more tips on how to make it better. So today, we're going to talk all about blowjobs. Let's discuss how amazing they are, why we like them, and how to overcome common hangups around giving your husband oral sex if you want to. And more specifically for women, how giving your husband oral sex can be just as much, if not more, of a turn-on for you yourself than for your husband. My guest expert today is Danielle Savory. She's a sex coach for women. She's taught thousands of women on how to prioritize pleasure and specifically how to make sex more pleasurable for themselves. I learned in this interview that my guest Danielle loves giving her husband oral sex, so much so that she's had just as many orgasms herself just from giving them. She teaches that women can step up and embody the whole turned-on woman persona and create a richer, juicier life and marriage. Now, next weekend is our virtual lovemaking retreat called The Next Level Lovers, a virtual intimacy retreat for passionate couples. Emily and I are excited to guide you and your spouse through exercises in hour-long sessions Friday night, Saturday morning, and Saturday night designed to really light the fire and bring more passion and pleasure into your marriage and relationship. Because, hey, don't we all need a little more pleasure and strength to our marriages these days? It's not too late to register if you're quick. You can sign up at getyourmarriageon.com, click on retreat, and then virtual retreat. Now, speaking of retreats, I'm super excited to announce that our next in-person retreat is going to be October 26 through 29 in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. These retreats are transformative, super romantic, and absolutely amazing experiences for you and your spouse to come and spend 4 days and 3 nights with us. You can check out all the details on our website under retreats also. Danielle, welcome back to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. You were on here, I checked it was like 2 years ago. And it's been so fun. Yes, it's been 2 years when we first recorded and everything. It's been a wonderful 2 years. I'm so glad that you're here. And I'm really looking forward to today's topic.
Me too. And thanks for having me back. And I'm still like flabbergasted. It's been 2 years. I would have said like a few months ago, maybe a year ago, but like, whoa, like 2 years. That's a long time.
That's good.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, because of your line of work and everything, we're both sex and intimacy coaches.
Yep.
Have you ever been in a situation where your idea really stood out from the crowd? You didn't realize it at first until after you said what you did. Like, really? I'm the only one that thinks this?
Yeah. I mean, I have that often in a variety of different ways, being a sex coach, of course, right? Because number one, we're talking about sex openly, but pertaining to blowjobs in particular, this was way before I became, a sex coach and just openly. I was always been very open talking on the topic. And I just remember somehow blowjobs came up. Maybe it was at a book club or something, some gathering. I literally do not remember like the context of what the gathering of women was, but blowjobs came up and I was like, just like excitedly, like, oh my God, I just love him. Don't you love him? It's like the looks that I got was like, I was a crazy person. Like I was like this alien in the room, like how, my enthusiasm, number one, then my excitement, and then my love for them. And I remember in that moment, because this was before I had done a lot of coaching work or mindset work or any of this kind of, awareness of what's happening in my brain sort of thing, like how much shame I felt in that moment. And it just like, oh my gosh, like, I mean, number one, when you feel like you're distant from the crowd, shame can happen. And then like, wait, is that wrong? Like, am I supposed to not like this? Like, I thought, like, I think in a group of men, especially back then, it would have been like, oh, like, that's awesome. That's great. And cheered kind of thing
Yes.
versus like in a group of like, you know, women and my peers where they were like, no, that's not like birthday blowjobs, maybe, but only because it's like his birthday, and that kind of
Uh-huh.
approach. So, yeah, it definitely I was singled out there and I just felt a lot of shame. And there was a time period there where I just questioned a lot of this. Like, where is this coming from? Like, is
Mhm.
this something I'm not supposed to like? Does that make me like a bad, like feminist or equality? Or is this degrading? Or am I, being dirty? Or like all these other messages that were given as women that were socialized around, it made me start questioning and like doubting my enjoyment of them.
Mhm.
I didn't stop enjoying them. Let's just make it clear. I've always loved them. I've had a
Uh-huh.
great time with them, but it
Uh,
did make me like pause and question and have like that kind of background of feeling of shame, not
uh-huh.
during so much, but afterwards. And I think that's really common for a lot of women and that can really bring the mood down for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool. So, how did you work through that? Obviously, it's not an issue now.
Yes. Yeah, it's not an issue now. I mean, I think that it started just with the questioning, that comes in with like, wait, am I wrong? Like, is this wrong? And like, kind of coming from that angle and what do I want to think about this? How do I want to feel about this? And I'm like, this is something that my partner and I really enjoy. I mean,
Mhm.
this was when I was talking to this group of women, it was my husband now at the time that I was talking about it. And it it's something that we really enjoyed. We both really loved it. And I was like, you know what, how we feel about this is way more important than how other people or society or anybody else feels. And then of course meeting the shame in my body. I mean, there was layers to it, but really for that one, it didn't feel as hard for me to untangle. It actually became harder, I think, later when I was deep into sex coaching
Uh-huh.
because so much of the research and the things that I was looking into and all these things that I was doing, how much we're presented our sexuality through the male lens of pleasure
Uh-huh.
then made me question, like, wait, do I only like this because the way that I was presented with blowjobs made me think that this is what I should like because it was through the male lens of pleasure. So that was kind of like a funky one
Ah.
for me to take a look at. And again, after questioning it and coming back down to it and asking myself, like getting in touch with my actual desire, I was like, no, I just like them.
I that good, that's good. You took like that
Yeah.
it's an internal moral compass instead of an external moral compass now.
Yes.
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 That is so
Yeah.
cool. Well, I think your research is good because it correlates with what my Instagram audience said. To prepare for this episode, I pulled my Instagram audience and
Love
I
it.
asked them, like, do you incorporate oral sex into your lovemaking? And 80% said yes, which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
Then I asked husbands and wives these questions. Husbands, do you enjoy giving and do you enjoy receiving? And then wives, do you enjoy giving and do you enjoy receiving? And 85% of husbands said they love giving. 92% said they enjoy receiving. But for wives, it was different. It's 75% enjoy receiving, but only 55% enjoy giving. So there's a 30% gap there as on
Yeah.
the giving side. And almost everyone wanted to learn more about oral sex. Why do you think
Yeah.
there is that gap in the
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of different reasons, but I think one of the main ones is when we really think about how oral sex has been presented in general, or the way that we have learned about it. When we talk about seeing so much of this through the male lens of pleasure, it makes sense why that would, why I would like to receive it. Not only does it feel good, but the way that society has presented it is in this, more of a highlighted way, where
Yes.
in
Uh-huh.
a lot of ways, when it comes to the opposite and women receiving oral pleasure, usually it's presented as like, oh, well, this is okay if you really love your wife or if you really want to give, like it feels like an intimate thing. It's not like, oh, just everybody is going to, have oral sex, like, as a woman receiving and a man giving, unless you're really dedicated, unless you're really in a relationship. So, the blowjobs, on the other hand, could be like anybody could give you a blowjob, or you would just give a blowjob, or it's like this thing for the man, but it doesn't, the way that it's presented hasn't been as intimate. Sometimes it's very degrading. Sometimes it's kind of like a domineering sort of situation. And so I think it starts just from how it's presented, where, like cunnilingus is like presented in this way that is very intimate. It's emotional. You're in this like relationship with someone, where blowjobs are not presented that way
Gotcha.
most
Yeah.
of the
Uh-huh.
time.
Uh-huh.
And I think that that's something that as women going into a relationship or doing that, we still have those thoughts and those images in there, that is something that maybe you do, if you're not in a serious relationship, or maybe you're giving to a guy, or sometimes like a woman that might do that might be seen as somebody like not wife material. Like, this is just something I get, as for a sexual pleasure to get me off, and not really looking at the woman as highly that does a blowjob. So, when we think about it that way, I think it really makes sense, because blowjobs have not been like presented as this like juicy, intimate, like I love you sort of act.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the juicy "I love you" intimate act of a blowjob. What's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
like? What's in the mindset there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we have to take a look at the contrast, right? Because it's like so many of the things that I hear women talking about is it's a chore, it's just for
Mm.
him. I'm doing this because I know he likes it.
Mhm.
He likes seeing me like this. Like, I think a lot of men, are able to see, if they're married, see their wife as this like sexual turned on being, and they have their own thoughts about a blowjob, right? And then on the
Mhm.
other side, when we're talking about like what's the opposite of that, it's like, of course I would want to. Like, this sounds so fun. I can't wait to turn you on. Like, this is, this special, like intimate thing that I get to do for you. And also I think for women, helping bring that in for them and their experience as well. But like starting with like almost like an adoration, or a revering, or like, "Oh, I'm so lucky because I get to love on this penis." Like, really like, almost like on this pedestal,
Uh-huh.
beautiful, loving thing,
It's like, it's a
which is how
privilege. Yes.
yes, it's a
Uh-huh.
privilege, yes,
Right.
like,
Uh-huh.
which is how as women, that's how we hope that our man looks at us when they go down, is like, "Oh my gosh, like the golden gates have opened and here I get to be."
That's so true.
So
Uh-huh.
and so we want to think about like, what would we want our man to look like going down on us? And that is going to give you an idea of the way that you can look at the same reciprocation towards him.
I love that. I love that idea. Great. Now, there's a lot of hangups when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Of course, we want that better mindset, but one is how it's gross. Like,
Yeah.
there's that mentality, or that's been handed to them. How do
Yeah.
you any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Look
I
through
think
that.
there's definitely mindset stuff, and then just like straight up hygiene things
Yes,
too,
uh-huh.
And
Right,
I think having
practical,
that
right.
communication, just practical things, like, and having that communication. And it's like, I'm definitely not going to love a blowjob if my husband just worked out. Like, absolutely no, thank you. And so it's just like understanding also, we don't have to work our mindset around everything. So asking your partner to clean ahead of time, or do this kind of thing ahead of time. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if you have this like trusting relationship with one another. But I also say that with a little bit of a caveat, because I think that as a society, we have looked at body fluids in general, especially sexually body fluids, as like dirty or gross, when
Uh-huh.
what we need to also begin to turn our minds towards is this is a natural part of sex, right? This is a
Yes.
natural part of this intimate relationship. Body fluids, body smells. Like, I'm not supposed to smell like a spring garden down there, and neither are you. Like, that's
Right.
just straight up
Mhm.
like what society has taught us. So, that is part of us doing the mindset work. And that being said, you know, a little bit of water goes a long way, and
Mhm.
that can help us baby step towards this place where if you are, like, really grossed out at the beginning, I'm learning to see that this is all part of intimacy. Nothing is wrong here, just like body odor in general, body hair in general, all of these things that society has kind of put into this box of, "Oh, let's, like, well manicured, well smelling," like, all these things, like, that isn't actually true. That's
Uh-huh.
just, what we have been sold. And so understanding that and, like, starting to untangle that at the same time you're doing it, but not like because I'm grossed out by you, but because I don't wanna have that hang up right now. So it's both, it's we can come from it from both angles um, but I think really realizing that it can be a preference, but there's a difference between a preference and making somebody wrong for a smell or a body fluid or anything like that.
Yeah, it's like having judgment towards it, right?
Yes. Like, that's gross. Like, let's just not say that about our partner
Mhm.
at all. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe I'll say that to my husband if he, like, farts at the dinner table. I'm like, "That's gross.
Yes.
Please do not do that."
It's
You
crude.
know?
We're right. Exactly. Uh-huh.
When it comes to our intimacy and our sexual relationships, like, let's just start to eliminate, like, that word and understand that the only reason that we even think that's, yucky or gross is because somebody, probably when we were young kids, told us that it was.
Yes, because otherwise, you probably not have thought
Yeah.
that.
No. Yeah. It's just like worms. I know this is, like, totally separate, right? But, like,
Uh-huh.
you see
Earthworms.
kids
Uh-huh.
playing with earthworms, and they're fascinated by them, and they're so cool until grandma was like, "Ew, put that down, that's gross, what are you doing?" To you, it was just this fascinating creature in the earth that's, like, wiggling around your flowers. It's the same kind of thing, we have to remember that we can come back and unlearn the things that we have learned, especially when it's disconnecting us from our partner.
Ah, that's excellent. Any stories of anyone you've coached that had to go through this process? What did she go through? What were her mindset shifts? What was that like
Yeah.
for her?
Yeah, for sure. I can just think of one recently where, it started with this kind of thing that we're talking about here, just kind of this, "Ooh, it's kind of gross." And so we started just listing, like, what are the actual things that you're thinking about this? This is a chore. This is gross. I feel like she was like, I feel like a whore. I
Uh-huh.
feel like, I'm just doing this for him. My jaw hurts. I don't know how long I'm supposed to do it. Like, just like we just listed all of it. Like, let's
Uh-huh.
just take a look. And then let's start peeling this apart one by one. Like, how do you want to feel when you are giving a blowjob? Like, how do you want to be? How do you want to feel about the whole experience and not getting so in the weeds about, like, oh, the smell or oh, the body fluids or oh, am I doing it right? But let's get to that place of what do I really want this experience to look like? And then as we start giving more airtime to your desires and where you're leaning towards, you can start to see how these other thoughts are coming up that are just lingering, likely from the way that you've been socialized or been taught about it. And sometimes there's stuff that we need to work through, with the body, especially if it's something that feels unsafe,
Right.
because that can come up for a lot of women. Is a feeling of unsafe, whether that's fear from judgment, or fear if there's any kind of like sexual assault in your past, fear of not being in control. That's a big one.
Yes.
Um, and so
Or
that,
pleasing, fear of not
yeah,
being good enough, or
yeah,
what if he doesn't like it? What if I'm
yes,
a horrible lover in this way? Yeah.
yes. Like the confidence factor is a big
Mhm.
one. So there's a number of different things. And so just really holding space, like, it makes sense. Like when we really think about the way that most of us have learned about blowjobs, of course, there's like nervousness. Of course, you don't feel confident. And of course, there might be a little bit of fear coming up, and that's all real. And we can hold space for that.
That's cool. Okay, talking about confidence.
Hmm.
All of my kids except one are in karate.
Hmm.
And in karate, there's kata, which is like a form. It's kind of like dance moves you memorize, right?
Hmm.
Step this way, block this way, punch this way. And my 6-year-old, she is so cute. Because then when she does it, she could do the kata all wrong, like the wrong steps, wrong hands, everything, but she just exudes confidence doing it. And
Yes.
there's something to be said about, like, she's really getting into it when doing it, even though
Yeah.
the steps might be wrong.
Yeah.
And you've said in the before that, like, it's not just about technique, but it's who you are being when you are going down on your partner. It's the way you move, the way you look at your lover, the way you speak to him, like, as if you just can't get enough. Can you talk to
Yeah.
that a little more?
The way that I'm coaching women in my programs and stuff is really embodying what I like to call the turned on woman. So really
Mhm.
feeling like the turned on woman, and the turned on woman looks different in different containers. She shows up and expresses herself different in different containers. And I think sometimes when we think about blowjobs, we're thinking about them in one kind of container. Like maybe it's a little bit more wild or a little bit more spicy. And so I think first starting out with like, who do I want to be when I'm giving this blowjob? Like maybe it is that wild. Maybe it is a little spicy. Maybe it is more of this dominant relationship, either the woman being dominant or the man being dominant. Like starting to like get clear in your mind, like who are you being? And understanding that each person that you are being is just an expression of you. It's still all you. You're not putting this mask on. This isn't a performance. This isn't you pretending you're somebody else, but it's like, what qualities and traits do I want to express? And when we start to tap into that, that allows the confidence to come through because it really isn't about as much of the technique. Like you should know a couple of things of what to do, what not
And
to
we'll
do,
get into
right?
that in a moment. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. But it's really like, I am here because I want to please you, or I want to take care of this, or I love this part of you so much and I'm excited to like worship it or love on it or make you
Yes.
feel so good, right? Like it's
Uh-huh.
like all of these feeling states that you're really stepping into. And the confidence that regardless of how things go, because they can go south for
Uh-huh.
sure. Like there's things that
Uh-huh.
can go wrong in this category, right? But regardless of how things go, like my intention is to show up in this way, and that you can have confidence in. That is in your control. The way that you are showing up is in your control. And that's what can create that confidence because you don't always know how your partner is going to like it or not. You don't always know if they're, you know, going to be surprised by a certain technique that you're using. Like you just don't know, right? But you
Mhm.
are in control of how you want to show up. So if you get clear on that ahead of time, it will be really helpful.
That's great. So you take care of hygiene, first of all,
Mhm.
and then now let's talk about techniques. What happens
Yeah.
next?
Yeah, so I think the techniques, I mean, there's so many different type of techniques. Again, I think it goes into what you are wanting this experience to be like. If it is
Uh-huh.
something that's a little bit more like a
Naughty or
fantasy
wild?
or a
Uh-huh.
naughty
Right.
or like a play out of something,
Uh-huh.
or if it's like a ritual, like I am literally ritualizing, worshiping, loving on your penis, like those are going to look
Right.
different. One might be
Right.
more slow, one might be more like strokes and like examining and like oohing and eyeing and like deep eye contact, where another might be like more of like the actual whole penis in your mouth. You might be wanting your head to be, you know, grabbed or your hair to be grabbed. Like there's all these other different elements. And you can communicate that with your partner ahead of time. So the technique is really also dependent on what is the mood that's being presented in this encounter.
Great, great. Okay. So if you're new to this and you want to get better at it, some instruction on technique will help or go a long way, at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some basics?
Some basics are you do not need to suck on it the whole time. Okay. This is
That's a
like
misconception. Yep.
it's a misconception.
Uh-huh.
Most men actually don't really like that, you know? So
Uh-huh.
saliva goes a long way. Have like I'm showing in the screen, you can't see me in the screen,
Uh-huh.
but I have a huge water bottle. Like drink a lot of water ahead of time. Make sure you're hydrated, have water there because spit goes a long way. It's more fun for your partner and it feels better for you. So you
Mhm.
want to get it wet. So using your tongue, spitting on it, getting it all wet. Like the more lubrication, the better. And so that's a huge one. That's going to create less friction, easier for you and easier for him. So that is a huge one, is make
Which is
sure.
also a plug for flavored lubricants and things like that too. They have a place for that.
Yes, yes,
Uh-huh.
they do have a place. So that is something that you can also use. But having water nearby.
Mhm.
The other thing that I would say is use your hands. Like a lot of women think that it's just this mouth only thing. Your hands are really important, and they can they can add to the experience both for you and for him. So you don't feel like it's like this mouth jaw thing the whole time, but you're working in unison with your hands. So think of your hands almost like as this extension of your mouth, or how you're using your mouth. Depending on how, like, well endowed your partner is, like, that is something else that you wanna consider, because keeping your mouth open for that long can be uncomfortable regardless, but if you're getting filled up in the mouth, that can be even more uncomfortable. So being able to use your hands and hang out with the tip. Like, think about it more like a ice cream cone that you're licking and enjoying
Uh-huh.
versus something you're just, like,
Like a
shoving in your
popsicle.
mouth.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, especially if you're like a biter on popsicles. It's not
Yes.
what we're trying to do there.
Uh-huh.
But that being said, like, teeth can be, like, a part of it. Like, a lot of people are so afraid of their teeth touching. Of
Uh-huh.
course, you don't wanna clamp down. You don't wanna, like, bite in there, get in there, but your teeth can be, when used lightly and with control and with intention, can be an addition to the hands and the tongue and the mouth that are all
Mhm.
happening.
And I like that it doesn't all have to be sucking the whole time too. There can be a lot
No.
of licking and other things too.
Yes, exactly. And moving around and, like, kissing and going up and
Mhm.
down and stroking, like, it really is that, like, think of it like I am making out with versus like I am sucking. Like, if you're making out with a penis, it's gonna be much different
Mhm.
than just sucking it. Like, I rarely suck very much because it really isn't that pleasurable. I mean, for you or for him long term. Like, a little bit's okay, but there's not a lot of actual, like, sucking, like your cheeks go in sucking.
Yeah. What about, gag reflex? And people have concerns about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a normal concern to have the gag reflex.
Mhm.
And also, I want to say that your gag reflex, it's a reflex. It doesn't mean that you're going to throw up. It's your body saying, like, wait a minute, it feels like there's something going in my mouth that shouldn't.
Uh-huh.
So when you start to notice that, it's not that that's a definite stop. And I think a lot of people think that's a definite stop. It might be a slow down and a come out, but when you start working with your body and your nervous system and you're like, I'm fine, and you're still breathing through your nose and you're relaxed, you can help move past that gag reflex. So I think that's a good question. And also just understanding, like, it happens, like, you probably can gag. It's very normal. And again, just not making that a negative thing, or I have to stop, or anything
Mhm.
like that. That's going to help a lot, because you can just start a different area, or you can keep going. Like, it's really up to you. But
Right.
gagging is very normal.
And also, this is why hands are important too. To
Yes,
kinda
exactly.
can
Yeah,
have
back
gives
off
you
a
more
little bit.
control, right.
Yep.
And earlier you said some women don't like engaging and giving a blowjob because they're afraid it sounds like some power dynamic or they're getting overpowered. But
Mhm.
I don't know. It seems like the woman giving the blowjob, she's the one in control. She's the one
Yeah.
in power. She's
Yeah.
got teeth after all. Like,
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I mean, we
uh,
definitely could think of it that way, but when you
uh,
look at, especially, like, how so many of us have learned about blowjobs, which is probably through the porn industry or something like that,
uh-huh.
the
Or
like
exploitation or other things.
yeah,
Yes. Uh-huh.
yeah, I mean, it really is like this, like, degrading thing that it's like, you don't have any control, I'm doing this to your mouth, and it
Mhm.
can feel a lot like that. So I think just, like, understanding, like, it makes sense. Like, of course, you have those narratives, and, like, being able to be like, "Well, that's not what I'm doing," or deciding, like, I actually do want to have that kind of a role play or a relationship. Like, I do wanna feel kind of, like, dirty like that, and that's okay, and own it, right? And the thing that
Yes.
I think is so important, especially when we get into fantasy or role playing or things like that, is to remember, like, you aren't because some women I think worry like, what's wrong with me if I want to be, dirty or degraded or anything like that. You aren't actually being degraded. You
No.
aren't actually being out of control. In this context, you and your husband are in a loving, safe
Uh-huh.
relationship. And so reminding yourself that it really is something that you're playing out. You aren't actually being degraded or being put down or
Right.
not having control. And I think that can create a lot of safety if you're
Yeah,
worried about
because we're
that.
sometimes afraid of our fantasies, like, "Oh, no, if I think this, I'm gonna turn into that." Like,
Right.
but as a kid, you played cops and robbers or whatever, and it doesn't mean you
Yeah.
grew up to be a robber or a cop,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's about playing.
Yeah.
It's really play, just
Yeah. It's
stepping into that.
imagination and it's giving
Yes.
yourself permission to not like yuck one of your turn ons and creating a container and a safe space to be able to
Mhm.
explore that more.
There's something I think it speaks to your, erotic natures when you can really move
Yep.
and feel free to move into some of those more playful areas too.
Yes.
It adds another dimension to being alive and being with someone that you love and to
Yeah. I
explore
mean,
a
it's
new aspect of
vulnerable.
yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Vulnerability is what creates so much intimacy. And if you feel safe enough to get vulnerable and share your fantasies and share intimacy or share these type of situations and scenarios you want to share with your partner, that just shows another level of trust that you have with one another.
Great. Any other troubleshooting tips we should address when it comes to giving a mind-blowing blowjob?
I think the main one is, like I said, use a lot of spit.
Mhm.
Uh, Warming up and then communication,
Uh-huh.
because I think that it's easy to assume, especially as a woman, like what kind of blowjob maybe your partner wants, but having that conversation too, and not always, because it's like I think that communication is really important. Don't get me wrong. We should
Uh-huh.
always consent. We should always have communication. That's like hands down, of course.
Uh-huh.
And that being said, sometimes we want to lean into something without telling our partner, like, hey, by the way, I'm going to be doing this, this, and this, and this. Like, are you okay with that?
Uh-huh.
I think more is the communication that we have in general around our sex life. Like, how would you like me to tell you that I don't really like that? Or I'm not really sure? Or how would you like me to bring up a new idea? Should we just try it? Like, having that outside gives you the permission then to go forward or do something a little bit more, ask for something.
Mhm.
So I think that is a huge part of it is like the communication agreement that you have, not necessarily during, but leading up to, so that you're not surprised. Or if your partner really doesn't like what you're doing, they feel safe to be able to express that to you and vice versa without hurting anybody's feelings.
That's good. That's necessary for all aspects of sex too.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
that trust and that, we're on the same team here and we're
Yes.
we're working together to build a great sexual relationship we both want to participate in.
Yes, exactly,
Now, you've
exactly.
said in the past that I might be misquoting you, but you've had as many, if not more, orgasms giving a blowjob than
Yes,
uh,
absolutely.
whatever.
Was I don't know, my husband told me about I think it was, like, the first porn that ever came out, and it was about a woman that had a clitoris in the back of her mouth. You know you know, I don't
No.
know, it was, like, from the '60s or '70s. I think that was, like, the first, like, porn or something.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so I joke around that that's what's going on,
That's
but
you, huh?
no, yeah, no, that's not. I think for me, it's comes back to that turned on woman, and when I am like really stepping into that turned on woman, being that turned on woman, feeling like this, like giving and receiving, like this reciprocal relationship between us, and like like, I think especially what I'm giving, it can be like this relaxation, like, this is for me too. This is
Mhm.
for like, I feel so turned on by this. I feel so alive by this. I feel
Yes.
so into this. My partner is so into it and they're enjoying it. So it's that kind of like reciprocal circular experience. Like, that's really what creates orgasms. I mean, you
Mhm.
couldn't have an orgasm without even touching yourself. And so
It's
there
possible, yeah.
is, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And so understanding that it's like the energy and the experience that you're creating with your partner and that overall texture to it can turn you on so much. And also you or your partner can be touching yourself during these. So it really is this like reciprocity and experiencing your turn ons and meeting it as well.
As you say, that reminds me of what Dr. Esther Perel taught, that for most women, what turns her on is knowing that she is the turn on. Like being the
Hmm.
turn on is her turn on. Like,
Yes.
because knowing I can turn this man on is a big turn
Yeah.
on to her.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that when we especially couple that with our own desire, because as women, we've been socialized to be desirable and to be the turn on so much to the extreme that we forget that it's really important what is turning us on too. But
Good
when we
point.
are stepping into, because if it's just about turning the other person on, then you're so disconnected from your own experience.
That's
Right.
right.
Because we can be desirable all the time. We can feel like we're turning somebody on. I mean, I could go to the grocery store and turn somebody on, but that doesn't mean that it's welcome or that I'm experiencing or that I want. So I think it's really important for us to remember like, yes, this is part of it. And how am I receiving that? How am I wanting to? Because if you are feeling like, oh, this is turning them on, but this is a chore, it's only for him, all of these things, that's where stuff changes. And especially in long-term partnerships, that's where it really changes because maybe you were really turned on by turning your husband on when you first started, and that kind of wears off.
Uh-huh.
Like you're just like, cool,
It's not
obviously
sustainable. Yes.
no, you're
Uh-huh.
like, "Obviously, I'm sexy, like, of course you want me." Like, it does it's well, dudes, so it's like you have to, like, play into this a little bit and also come back to your own fire. Like, what are you feeling like in between your legs? How can you spread that energy and that pleasure and that experience so that it's both of you, not just you turning on your partner?
Excellent. This has been such a fun interview, Danielle. Thank you for your
Yes.
wisdom and everything. Can you tell us where people can go to find your courses? And I know you've done like an in-depth workshop on this specific topic too,
Yes,
and
so you
your
can find
coaching
that
and
on
everything.
my website, daniellesavory.com/dreamy BJs. So that's where you can find this particular class, and I go into a lot more detail about some of the stuff that we talked in there. And then I'm on Instagram at the practice of pleasure or my podcast, It's My Pleasure. So really focusing on all you ladies out there that want to feel more turned on.
Yes, very good. We can all use a little more pleasure in our life.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been super fun.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in accelerating growth in your marriage, either sexually, emotionally, or spiritually, I want to invite you to work with me in my affordable coaching program called Next Level. More information about Next Level and my fun and sexy apps for couples are available at getyourmarriageon.com. Please also don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And be sure to tell your married friends. I promise, they will thank you for life. Now go get your marriage on.